down relative to others. One tool that can help you track the property tax owed is the King County Assessor's Office Tax Transparency Tool. You'll find this tool at the King County Assessor's Office website or at the link on the slide. Next but not least, I want to discuss property tax relief. The administration understands that people may struggle with their property tax during a time of immense pain and frustration, and wishes to acknowledge the available exemptions or deferrals on offer through the King County Assessor's Office. One available exemption is for senior citizens or the disabled. Those who own and occupy their residences as of December the 31st and receive less than 65% of the median household income in King County can receive an exemption from some of the property taxes they owe. In addition, the King County Assessor's Office offers a deferral to senior citizens or the disabled. The income limit is slightly more than $67,000, and if approved, the applicant can defer their property tax liability to a later year. However, it's important to keep in mind that through this program, deferred taxes plus accumulated interest will become a lien on the property until the total amount is repaid. Last but not least, the King County Assessor's Office offers a limited income deferral program. It is available to individuals who have owned and occupied their property for 5 or more years and have a disposable household income of less than $57,000 in the previous year. Someone approved for this program can defer 50% of the property tax they owe, and the deferred taxes plus accumulated interest will become a lien on the property until the total amount is repaid. For more information on property tax relief, the administration recommends going to the King County Assessor's Office website, calling the following numbers on the slide, or emailing the following address on the slide. The King County Assessor's Office is the best bet for answering any questions an interested taxpayer may have about property tax relief. All right, thank you. And now I'd like to pause for a moment to see if there are any questions or comments.
Any questions, council?
So quick question. So you're recommending the 1% and going and getting the 0.5% we didn't take last time.
So basically the total would be 2.03%. In fact, there are 2 years previously that we did not take the full 1%. So I think in 2018, it was 0.5%. And then last year was the full 1%.
Of bank that we didn't take. So we have 1.5 banked is what you're saying.
It gets complicated a little bit. So what I would say is the total amount available to the city at this stage right now is 2.03% or up to $164,000.
Thank you.
Councilmember Holloway. You're muted. I'd ask folks to use the raise hand because I can only see 6 video screens at a time.
Can we go back to page 11, I believe it is? The excess levy. So this was already voted in. This is not, it would require action of the council to actually undo this, correct?
Yeah, I would presume so. Yes.
Okay, so this is just for awareness that that bond was voted in and it results in this payment, but that was voted in 2002. All right, thank you.
Right, and that cost goes away in December at the end of 22, which means property taxes will come down slightly. It's running right now about 13 cents per thousand, Drew?
It's more like 7 cents per $1,000.
Okay. Over the years, it's been steadily dropping because it wasn't front loaded.
Right.
And so as the population has grown, as the city has grown since the fire station bond was approved, it's more people sharing in the cost of it. So it's dropped cost per thousand.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Ross.
So basically regarding this levy, we're just approving the ordinance to pay it for this year. Is that correct?
Do you mind restating that question? I don't quite.
So the levy that we have already approved for the fire station.
Well, we're in luck when they're still talking about the property tax levy.
Okay.
On council.
The excess levy that we're going to pay, we're basically approving the ordinance.
Well, somebody else from our agency is clearly signing on because there's my picture. They signed in through our agency, and it is just a bunch of Jennifer Perks in the room.
Or can whoever's the host, can you please mute Jason?
Did you understand? Did you hear what I said?
Sorry, Councilmember Ross, if you could restate your question.
Okay, so this is the
Hi,
one-
moderator. Hi, little
Hey,
buddy.
can the host please mute Jason? Jason Roger, thank you. Go ahead.
the reason why this is up here is because we're just approving to pay for it again this year, right? Through the ordinance.
Yes, so in this instant, we have to incorporate it right into our certification of regular excess property taxes for this year. Otherwise, the levy rate would drop right now. We'd have to find other resources in order to backfill and pay for this, so. Okay,
Go ahead, Councilmember Sunwell. Again, if folks could please use the raise hand feature, because fortunately, Councilmember Sunwell and some who have raised their hands physically have been in my sights, but not everyone is. Go ahead, Councilmember Sunwell.
So are we discussing it today, or do we need to, we can't vote on this. This is the first read, right?
correct. This is the first reading. The second reading would come at the second meeting in November,
Yeah,
or
so
later this month.
we can discuss this twice, or we can discuss it once, right?
Yes,
Well, the idea is to, take advantage of the time tonight to
Right.
discuss it thoroughly, yeah. So this is for introduction tonight, but perfectly appropriate time to discuss it in detail and answer all questions or concerns.
Well, I'll just say what I think is obvious. I don't see any other choice of not to do this. I mean, every budget we've looked at, I believe, has assumed that we're going to take the full capacity. And last time I checked, we're still struggling to have a balanced budget without dipping in significantly to reserve. So we're literally talking not a lot of money. And I don't see any other way that would be responsible that we can avoid this.
As the council may recall, in the past months, as we've gone through the challenges facing us and the gap between revenues and expenses, or the deficit, projected deficit, that we did run those different scenarios with the 1% of the bank capacity as one of the tools that could be used. And we thought we did hear a concurrence from the vast majority of the council that there would be support for that. So I hope this is not coming as a surprise to anyone. Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I would just share I have the same viewpoint as Councilmember Sunwall, and I would also just point out that even with these increases, so the mayor's proposed budget includes a presumption that we pass these increases, we will still be digging into reserves by well over $500,000, and even with this tax increase. So granted, I support that because it's a rainy day fund, and I sure think this is a rainy day, but I also think that I also share the viewpoint of Councilmember Sunwall that this is appropriate and given the budget that we face.
Councilor Lassagne.
Well, I think everyone knows that I've been not necessarily in favor of the tax increases.
You're not a taxing person, as we understand.
I'm not a taxing person. And more towards strong fiscal responsibility. I think it's pretty clear that we are not able to handle our strong fiscal responsibility without a tax increase. And while I look at this and I'm not surprised that we're taking our banked amount from last year, I am surprised we're taking it from 2 years ago. So I would like to at least have an opportunity to see how that has been calculated a little more in detail. Maybe a 3-year or 4-year since the last 1%. Understand what those numbers are, to how we got to the 2.03. But in all reality, when we're looking at this screen right now and looking at the dollar amounts, no matter what value your house may be at, it's still less than a single tank of gas.
So putting it in perspective, it's really not, it's not a huge impact, although I know, and I appreciated, Drew, some of the deferral and other sort of items that were presented there, but and it will impact some people, and I understand all that, but it when it really comes down to it, it's not a significant amount of money.
Right. Before I go to Councilmember Sunwell and Ross, I wanted to give Drew an opportunity to go through. It might fall in the category, be careful what you pray for. You'll get an explanation of how you get to the 2.3%.
Oh, it's complicated.
That could be something you bring back to us later if you don't want to do it.
No, now's a good time to do it. I mean, the clear one is the 1%, but even that's complicated due to the price deflator. But then 2 years ago, the council passed on 0.5%. Last year, 1%. So there's a total of 1.5%. But because of, again, these price deflator things, we can't grab the full 1.5. But I'll let Drew explain it far more complicated fashion, or accurate but complicated fashion.
Okay, let's see what I can do here then. In essence, there are actually two totals that are being calculated simultaneously. The King County Assessor's Office is mandated by the RCW code to calculate it kind of one way, and we're mandated to calculate it a different way in terms of tracking what our legally allowable levy is. So actually, every year that you pass on those refunds that we actually collect, so you can see that we've collected about $7,000 in a refund for 2020. We're proposing a $2,000 refund for 2021. That actually gets subtracted out of your legally allowable levy amount. But it's not actually subtracted out from your prior year's actual levy. And so because the King County Assessor's Office is using that number in order to measure what that percentage increase looks like, that's where the difference comes into play. So do you really have the ability to take out the 1% this year? No, it's actually more like 0.92 would be our total highest limit factor available to us, because we chose to accept the $7,000 in refunds in 2020 for the most part. So it's a mathematical puzzle for the most part. It's something that we kind of have to go through. The one way to solve this problem is to maybe never take refunds again for the most part. If you wanted to remain consistent, if we tell you 1% limit factor, you will indeed get the 1% limit factor. But because of these refunds that come into play in this situation here, with the two different calculations that we're doing, you're just not going to get the same result. And that ends up essentially reducing our bank capacity over time because we are accepting those refunds. So that's a long explanation. It probably didn't make very much sense to people. It's easier to do it if you actually show on a screen at some point. I just don't have the materials with me right now, and so that's a bit more difficult.
So Drew, to say it differently, council can take the 1% maximum for next year for 21. It can go backwards and grab the 1% it passed up on in 2020 and the 0.5% from 2019 that it passed up on. And so it would be a total of 2.5%, but because of all these other variables on refunds and price deflators, 2.03 is the maximum we can take. Is that
right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Councilmember Sunwell, Ross, and then Shepherd.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't meant to be, and I told you so. We had this discussion the last 2 years when we decided to punt, right? Is that we would never actually get the full amount back that we punted on. That's fine, whatever. I'm reading the tea leaves here a little bit. I do feel like we have a concurrence here, but I would encourage people that you might have a philosophical approach to taxes, right? But we don't live in a philosophical world. We live in a practical one where we have to pay bills. And I think we've spent, I think, literally 6 months looking at every possible thing to cut. And we're done. And we're still having a dip in the rainy day fund. So I would encourage people who might be struggling with this is, I'm not asking you to set aside your philosophy. I'm just asking you to weigh it against the practicality of what we're up against.
Just quickly, can someone let Nicole and Carson in the meeting? They're in the attendees list. Councilor Ross and Councilor Shepherd.
I think with the current economic situation facing our residents, the businesses, our community, and the city, And the challenges of raising revenues during COVID, right now, during COVID, the pandemic, we've already discussed on the utility rate discussion that we would not raise rates for 2021. And I think that raising property taxes is a good compromise to help us continue with the levels of service that our residents expect. And so if we don't raise utility rates for 2021, I think we absolutely need to raise the property taxes.
Councilmember Shepherd?
Yeah, I wanted to understand what this refund is.
So I don't actually have more information than you do. We've incorporated the King County assessment worksheet as a part of the package for each ordinance for the most part. But I don't exactly know who it's coming from. But in essence, we're proposing to collect about $2,000 or so in refunds, reassessed to the city. And then eventually that gets reassessed to the balance of taxpayers in the future year, like such as 2022. So.
And I just wanted to add that, it's the refunds are pretty small, just, 7,000 one year, 2,000 the next year, but that's routine. There's always a modicum of people that overpay, or there's an assessment that they, sometimes contest. So that does fluctuate year to year.
Councilmember Lasay?
Yeah, since we're looking at this chart, I was also then on the new construction side, can you give us a kind of a download of what goes into the jump from, or maybe what is included in, 32,000 for 2020, but now 62,000 for 2021. And before you answer that, I'm also, it seems like we're discussing the agenda bill during this time as much as we are discussing just the concept of property tax increase. So I'm glad, I don't know whether that makes a difference or not, is what we're asking.
So in terms of the new construction that we have here, I can tell you that we're actually adding about $26.76 million of assessed valuation based on that local new construction. I'm not sure exactly when they made that assessment, likely over the summer, for example, or necessarily for what properties that they assessed as a part of that. But I would assume it's a part of the ongoing construction that's happening right now. Could be, for example, Panorama Apartments, the Snow King arena for the most part, maybe the additional building next to Z-Tech up there that would have contributed to that number.
Hey, Drew, in this case, who is they?
The King County Assessor's Office.
Okay, thank you.
And then last year it was the Hampton Inn was the bulk of that, the new construction. Excuse me, 2020, the last year's assessment.
Yeah. Councilmember Shepherd, you still have your hand up? Oh, okay. All right, any other questions or comments, council? All right, Drew, thank you. I think our anticipation was that, we had a debate at the F&A committee as to whether we would start the council meeting at 7 o'clock, not need a roundtable. Our conclusion was, let's go ahead and start the roundtable at 6, and tackle what we thought would take at least an hour in the roundtable so that the council meeting could end more quickly. I thought everybody would welcome that, but we didn't anticipate maybe being done in a little over half an hour. Drew or Robert, is there anything else on the agenda for the roundtable?
Well, I've got a second presentation ready to go too, Mayor.
Oh, you could have stopped me from saying all that and just jumped in. Thanks. Go ahead. Let's go ahead and do that then.
Before Drew starts, I just want to make an announcement to everybody because there's some questions on where the public can find all the budget materials and everything we're speaking about tonight. And if they go to the City of Snoqualmie website, you're going to see the Finance Department is an option. You go to the Finance Department, you'll see 2021 and 22 budget. And we do have a lot of information available on there, including all the presentations that Drew has tonight, all the ordinances that we're proposing tonight, and also the mayor's budget transmittal letter for the 21-22 biennial ordinance. And so we're going to be updating that as we go along, as we get the final drafts and, ultimately the draft budget brief document we're going to have will all be in that one place. So anybody can access it at any time.
Real quick, I wanted to note before you start, Drew, that Carla Russell, I see her as an attendee here. We're going to have the proclamation at 7 o'clock at the council meeting at 7 o'clock. So unless you're find the budget issues to be captivating, you're welcome to continue to stay on. But otherwise, to spare you some time, as long as you come back, at 7 o'clock, we'll shortly get to that. And I don't know if Kim or Mark are related to some of those proclamation issues too, but that'll be at 7 o'clock. Councilmember Ross.
So regarding public information, when we do the public hearing, if we can maybe include the link in the notice or have it on the front of the page of the city website where they can see, oh, there's a public hearing and here's all the information regarding it. I think that would be helpful, as well as being able, maybe it links to the finance page that we don't have to search for it. Thank you.
Sure. Great idea. Thank you.
All right, Drew, go ahead.
All right, thank you, everyone. So I'd like to move on to the 21-22 biennial budget, emphasizing the ordinance before you today. Start off with, the council and administration have worked diligently together over the past 8 months to adapt to a changing financial reality and navigate a public health emergency. There were several animating concerns to begin this year, including the cancellation of the Salish Lodge expansion and the final build out of the Snoqualmie Ridge 2 development. But when the COVID-19 crisis hit, the city kicked the budget discussions into a higher gear, really tackling with intensity the fallout of our new financial environment. Because of the collaborative work between council and the administration, the proposed 21-22 biennial budget appropriates approximately 6% less in spending than the current 19-20 biennial budget. However, it's important to stress that while the 21-22 biennial budget is smaller, both the council and administration have put in the time and care necessary to ensure the continuity of services expected and appreciated by the residents and businesses of Snoqualmie. While the uncertainty stemming from the COVID crisis will surely continue into the next year, it does not mean that the crisis will last forever or that the work of the city won't continue. Indeed, the 21-22 biennial budget is really set up to focus on two key council priorities: to proactively maintain and sustainably replace needed city infrastructure, which is goal number 3, and to provide and protect services, which is goal number 4. For example, recall the establishment of capital programs to repave city streets, replace sidewalk panels, and conduct facility maintenance that occurred during council's capital improvement plan discussions over the summer. This very much fits in line with goal number 3. Furthermore, the level of service conversations council had in June and the translation of those assessments into action, as represented by the operating budget forms presented in September, evokes goal number 4 and the need to provide and protect services. A little more on the background. The city has been having budget roundtables since March, roughly 2 to 3 per month, in order to work and sort through this challenging financial environment. You can find the videos for these roundtables located on the city's YouTube channel or at the link on this slide. Over the course of this time, the city has accomplished a lot, producing and reviewing a 6-year operating financial forecast, discussing levels of service, crafting a non-utilities capital improvement plan, shaping operating budgets for departments such as police, fire, and parks maintenance, and others, and finally conducting a utility rate study. To get the mayor's deeper perspective on the 21-22 biennial budget and the work accomplished, please feel free to read the budget transmittal letter located on the city's website or at the link on this slide. Now, the biennial budget ordinance translates the work accomplished into a legal document ready for council approval. It is the culmination of council's and administration's work since March. The intent of this ordinance is to set something called the appropriation level for the upcoming biennium. This means that the council, through the ordinance, will set the spending level that city staff cannot exceed, unless amended by council at a later date. The recommendation from administration is to pass the biennial budget ordinance as currently written and without modification. A key piece of the ordinance is the budget summary form, as conveyed by this large and colorful table. The table sets the appropriation level by fund or functional classification, as in the case of the general fund, and includes estimates of revenues and cash balances to provide assurance to the council and the public that the city will operate over the next 2-year period self-sufficiently. While complex, the table reveals just how much the city is an interconnected system of departments that provide a diverse set of public goods and services. When it comes to describing the city to someone who works in the private sector, I personally like to use the term mini conglomerate, which is oxymoronic and a bit absurd, but really captures the diversity of activities that the city does on a daily basis, from public safety to the maintenance of parks to the provision of drinking water. Now, this table pretty much resembles the 1920 biennial budget table, but with 2 key additions. The administration separated out fund transfers, or the movement of cash between funds, from expenditures. The expenditure columns in the table now describe basically the purchase of goods and services. And secondly, we added a column at the end of the table, clearly calling out the total spending level to be approved by council for the 2-year period. Going back to the table, I'd like to focus a little bit on the last row that describes the total for all funds. To summarize the spending level recommended for council approval, the city is currently budgeting approximately $50.8 million in 21 and $48.8 million in 22 for expenditures, equal to $99.6 million for the biennium. The city is also budgeting roughly $26.5 million in fund transfers for the 2-year period. And as a result, the city is asking for a total appropriation of $126.1 million for the upcoming biennium. Focusing on the $50.8 and $48.8 million in expenditures and breaking things down a little more in terms of how much we would spend on operations versus capital, the city is budgeting roughly $32 million in operating expenditures for 21 and $32.5 million for 22. However, if you were to remove the internal service charges between departments, then the actual amount budgeted for operating labor, supplies, and vendor services will come out to approximately $26.6 million in 21 and $27 million in 22. Focusing briefly on the row labeled governmental type operating, the $18.1 million and $18.3 million presented here reflect and reconcile to the table council has commonly seen over the course of budget discussions, as shown here. And coming full circle, the $18.1 and $18.3 million budgeted for 21 and 22 respectively add up to the cells highlighted in black here, which consists mainly of the general fund, arts activity fund, environmental sustainability fund, human services fund, and community development fund. Now checking in on the CIP, the city is budgeting roughly $18.8 million and $16.3 million in capital related expenditures for 21 and 22 respectively. Breaking those expenditures down a little bit further, the majority of the capital spending would pay for water, sewer, and stormwater projects and programs meant to fix existing system deficiencies, preserve system assets, and maintain levels of service. Of the remaining amount, $5.9 and $4.6 million in 21 and 22 respectively would support non-utility CIP capital projects and programs. And $2.9 and $2.8 million in 21 and 22 respectively would go to service the debt on some long-term bonds. As you can see, I've included the fund number next to each category. This means that the expenditure totals listed here reconcile back to the ordinance table. Furthermore, and lastly, the expenditure totals listed here reconcile back to the original materials once presented to council. This includes the non-utility CIP statement of sources, uses, and cash balance as presented in August, as well as the utility CIP, which was once referred to as the Parks and Public Works Committee recommendation. And so after that, that's pretty much it for this. Thank you very much for your time. And at this moment, we would welcome any council discussion regarding the ordinance.
Any questions or discussion, council? All right, if there's no Questions? Drew, do you have anything else for tonight? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember Ross.
So in the ordinance, it looks like we're going to close out some of the accounts. And so I was curious, if we're closing them out, then where is that funding going? Such as you have water capital improvement fund. So what are you going to use instead of that, or the sewer capital improvement fund, for instance?
The water fund, we would transfer the money that's currently pooling in fund balance, for example, transfer that into the utilities capital fund. There's a few others, such as the flood reduction improvement fund, that would get consolidated into the utilities capital fund. I believe if we take a look here, I've got the funds that we are scheduled to close asterisks in the fund name section here. So in terms of the Tocal Roundabout Construction Fund and the Tocal Parking Lot Fund, we would consolidate those into the Transportation Capital Fund. And in terms of the King County Trails Levy Fund, that was used in the past to fund trails projects. And so because the trail maintenance program is a part of the Parks and Playground Capital Fund moving forward, we would transfer that money into that fund.
Okay.
So as a result, through this consolidation effort, you would see this table shrink a little bit more, which hopefully help council and help everyone kind of understand where we are financially in the future.
It makes it breathtakingly simpler, Drew. Thank you. I'm being facetious, of course. Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, well, I'm worried about that Fund 323 and how we're going to keep track of that $140. But I think it being facetious there, obviously, but I do think, you all have been talking to us, Mr. Hammoud, about the fact that there are way more funds in this chart than we need, and that you are diligently kind of going through this and have been since you got here, asking us to close some of these funds that aren't needed. And I know that you, because I've had discussions with you, that there are other funds on here that you would like to see closed out as well. And I know that you're just methodically ensuring that the balances that are in there and the future funding that has in the past gone through those funds, that you've really got those locked down. I really appreciate the diligence, and I really appreciate seeing these funds close. I encourage you to keep doing it. There are more, and I know you're after them, and encourage you to do it. But I think things like getting those three separate utility capital funds condensed into one, this is the kind of thing that just helps us, and frankly helps the taxpayers understand better what the heck's going on in here. So every step you take that simplifies, thank you.
Councilor Shepherd.
Well, I was going to say, we appreciate the help our whole staff has worked on closing these funds, during the accounting staff and the capital projects, to try to make sense, because some of these funds have been around for decades. Just a matter of making sure we didn't have, like you said, any restricted funds or anything else attached in there. So it's a long process, but we've made a lot of progress, especially with the last CIP document. And we appreciate council's support when we pass the last CIP ordinance to reduce some of these funds.
Councilor Shepherd and Councilor Ross.
So when you change a fund or close a fund, do we have some sort of tracking of when funds are closed, where they came from and where they're going to, for traceability? And also, I want to know about the last column. Looks like we've got 126 million that are showing up as appropriated. Is that correct?
That is correct. And indeed, if we take a look at the top here, it's a little bit hard to see. It adds up a number of columns. So we're actually adding up columns D, E, I, and J in order to reach this result. What that means basically is we're adding in the estimated 21 expenditures, the 21 transfers out, the estimated 2022 expenditures, and the 2022 transfers out, collectively merging those together into one appropriation for the next 2-year period.
For the last budget, we didn't have everything appropriated. So I'm curious why we're doing it differently this time.
We're doing it differently this time to make it very clear, or to illustrate in the spreadsheet that this is a biennium budget. In other words, it's 1 2-year budget. It's not 2 1-year budgets. And when the council is making the appropriation on a 2-year biennium budget, it's for 2 years. And there can certainly be some, mid-year or at the end of year adjustments made, but this is a 2-year budget.
Now, last biennial budget, we did not appropriate the entire amount.
We're not
Well,
appropriating the entire fund balances. I mean, again, as we've mentioned, we are closing some funds and making transfers of those funds. But for example, we're not appropriating the entire general fund. We're not appropriating the entire budgets. We're not doing that. We're only appropriating what our estimates for the budgets and the expenditures in those funds are for the 2-year period.
So I'm a little confused. What's the difference between appropriate and appropriations?
I'm sorry. Appropriations is what we're appropriating, what we're anticipating to spend for the 2-year period. So we're not appropriating any funds above and beyond what we believe is necessary. So we're not appropriating entire fund balances, for example, in the general fund if we don't believe we're spending that all.
Well, doesn't council decide what's appropriated beyond?
This is it. This is your chance right here. It's your opportunity.
Okay, so last biennial budget, we did not appropriate 100% of everything. So I'm just curious why it's different this time.
We're not appropriating 100% of everything either this time. We're not appropriating the entire city fund balances. We're just appropriating what our budgets are anticipated to be for the next 2 years, including capital projects.
So do we need another column to show what's appropriated, or?
This is what's appropriated, exactly what Drew's just showed you. It's that far right column is your total appropriations for the biennial budget.
I think
2001
maybe
to
she's looking for the second to the last column there that shows the fund balances. And well, I can't see what's on the far left, but anyway.
Well, the
Maybe.
largest number is the one that's is saying appropriation. So I guess I'm a little confused. I would expect appropriated number for the total for all funds to be something less than the total amount.
I suspect Councilor Mayhew is eager to give a whack at answering or addressing this, so I'll toss it to him. He said he has his hand up.
Yeah, just so that we all understand the term, appropriation is just the fancy word. That is what we, the council, are authorizing the administration to spend over the biennium. It's what we're authorizing them to spend, and it includes what we authorize them to shift between funds. So for example, our human services expenditures, we do out of a separate fund. So they have to transfer some of the money from Fund 1 down to that fund, and then they spend it from that fund. But the amount in the appropriation authorizes them to do the transfers and limits the amount of spending to only that amount there. So I'm not sure what we mean by appropriate everything, but we would expect to appropriate everything that we're authorizing them to spend, meaning they cannot spend any more than that without coming back to us. We have not in this proposal, or they have not proposed to us that we spend all of the fund balances that we have. So there will still be fund balances left after the appropriations they have proposed. They'll be less than they currently are because they're pulling them down to take advantage of rainy day fund as we're authorizing them to, and there's some capital expenditures that we're authorizing and so forth. But the appropriation just means total spending they can do, plus any transfers they can do. They have to come back to us to do any more.
Councilor Ross.
I also think last time that we did the biennial budget that we discussed the non-utility capital projects like in January, February the following year. And then I think that's when we came up with the budget for that. So this budget probably seems larger than what it was then, but this includes everything this time, and last time it didn't. So I just have one question. I was looking at the mayor's the mayor's letter. And in the biennial budget, it only has the expenditures, it doesn't include revenues in it. So will that be changed, or are we just only going to report expenditures on our biennial budget?
Robert or Drew?
Well, it does have the entire biennial budget table here. So that's where it rolls up. Now you're just a side note, you're actually appropriating. What you're approving is expenditures. You're not actually appropriating the revenues. These are just estimates. So again, this is all subject to change. It will change quite a bit. So with this, and again, we did include the table on the last page of that management letter.
Well, and I guess I'd have Bob or Robert speak to that further, but again, I don't think there's a council action on revenues. We're giving our best projections and basing the budget that you're approving on that. But we're prepared that the revenues may even the first or second quarter show they're not coming anywhere near our estimates. And so our commitment is we're going to still bring in a balanced budget. It just means we'll cut costs accordingly to line up with those revenues.
Right, but I would have thought that like this particular chart, for instance, that's up might be your attachment rather than just the expenditures only.
Councilor Mayhew, did you want to speak to that question or that item? Or?
Oh, yes. Well, I follow Councilmember Ross's request, and not to speak for her, but I think her request, she's just pointing out that the revenue, well, I won't say what she's pointing out, but it might be something to think about adding to that transmittal letter. But I think just to the point, Mayor, that I think you were making a minute ago, remember, fellow council members, that we authorize taxes and we authorize fees and we authorize spending, appropriation. That's all that we have the physical capability to do. The actual amount of revenues that will come in as a result of the tax and fees that we authorize is just an estimate. So we can't sort of order those revenues to appear. We can simply see that what the staff has estimated here. We can decide what the tax rates are, and we decide what the fee rates are. And then we can say, well, based on what you're estimating, and we either accept or don't accept your estimates, we will authorize a certain level expenditure. And so that's what we've got going on here. Earlier, we talked about the tax proposals for property taxes. Last session, we talked about the utility rates. And then tonight, we're talking about the expenditure levels, the appropriation. And that's really what we can do. So, but I suspect, Mayor, that my fellow council member was suggesting that something about the revenue side might be appropriate in that transmittal letter. But
yeah, I've jotted that down for us to have, or Rick can discuss it with the staff tomorrow morning. It occurs to me that although you spoke about it more eloquently than I would have about the council's roles and authority, although it's certainly the council's purview to see revenue projections and assumptions behind those and challenge assumptions and say, hey, we think your assumptions are too rosy or too dire, and direct that they be adjusted accordingly. And we'd have to go back and adjust expenses accordingly if the council didn't accept the revenue projections, or I should say the revenue assumptions. Could certainly challenge that. So for that reason, maybe it's relevant to put in there. And again, I'll take it up with staff tomorrow. So.
And we do have the whole table on the website, just to make it clear. And we do have a discussion on the revenues going into the general fund on there. But yeah, we can add that table at the end. That's no problem to add the full table. If you'd like us to.
Bob String, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add to what's been said, the statute speaks to both the transmittal from the chief executive and to the budget summary table. And as to the transmittal, it just outlines in general categories, what's to be included in the letter, an explanation of the budget generally, salient changes from the previous biennium, and so on. So there's certainly room there for adding, any discussion of the revenues, Mayor, that you deem appropriate. As to the budget summary table, it specifies, and the language in the ordinance tracks this, that we need to show total estimated revenues and total appropriations by fund and then in the aggregate. And so that's the aggregate total for the biennium is what you see, and as Robert pointed out in that far right-hand column. As has been noted, and it calls for estimated revenues. They're only estimated until we see what comes in. And if they come in excess of the estimated revenues, and those dollar amounts have not been appropriated, we would need to return to council with a budget amendment to appropriate those funds if they came in excess. But for right now, what you see in the table tracks what the statute calls for to be in the summary table. And it's 35A 34-120 for anybody following on their program at home.
And of course, our first action would be to use additional revenues to recommend it be put to, remove the use of rainy day fund. Council, I was losing track of time. I know, Councilmember Shepherd, you have your hand up. We're gonna have to wrap this up immediately and then give a little 5-minute break and reconvene with the regular city council meeting at 7:05. Councilmember Shepherd, we should have opportunity during the regular meeting to continue this discussion, so we could bring this chart back up or wherever your question pertains to that. So if you could make a note of that and just hold your question for that time. So right now it's 7 o'clock. Let's take a break. Anyone, I noticed there's quite a few people from the public that have joined us. Thank you. If you could just patiently hang on for 5 minutes, everybody will be back. Just suggest you turn your video off and mute your audio, and we'll see everybody back and start at 7:05 sharp.
But the other beds, those are reserved. So if an individual comes and they need shelter, they
Hey, Jimmy, are you there?
We're here, Mark.
Can you promote Heather Mulligan, Dylan Gamble, for the Green Direct? Thank you. And David Hoffman, I'm sorry.
And Carla Russell and Nicole Rousseau. And Rick Woodruff.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Carla, is there anyone else here tonight that is here regarding the proclamation?
Not from the network.
Okay, I see Kim Schneider, Mark Gardson. Or perhaps regarding either of the proclamations. All right, once I see that there's a quorum of the council back, we will get underway here. Right. And we do have a quorum. So with that, I will call this Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order and ask the Joan to please take the roll call.
Hi, Mayor. It's Nicole. I'll be doing roll call.
All right, thanks, Nicole.
Councilmember Jeans.
Here.
Councilmember Ross.
Here.
Councilmember Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Here.
Councilmember Lassay.
Here.
Councilmember Sunwall.
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Here.
Mayor Larson.
I am here. Thank you. Council, I can have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for tonight. Is there any comments or discussion, questions?
Yes, I'd like to take the warrants off of the agenda. And also AB 20-091, AB 20-090, and AB 20-095.
Point of order, are we removing those from the agenda or are we removing those from the consent agenda?
Removing from the consent agenda.
Right.
All right, thank you. Anything else, council? All right, with those modifications as noted, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes. Councilmember Shepherd, I think you still have your hand up from the roundtable. If maybe you could put that down and again, hang on to your question when we get to council or committee of the whole, then we could take up those questions again. Or did you have another question at this time?
No.
All right, thank you. All right, I will open the public hearing regarding the 2021-22 preliminary biennium budget. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item, just on this item here for the biennium budget? I see Richard Shield has his hand up. If we could turn on the microphone for Mr. Shield, please. Richard, you should be able to speak now. Hang on 1 second before you do, though. Let's make sure and get a timer ready for you.
I have it, Mayor, on my screen. This is Rick.
Perfect. Thank you, Rick. And sorry, how much time do we usually do for the public hearing? Bob Sturbank, is it 3 minutes or is it 2
Minutes, Mayor.
I'm sorry?
Jody says 3 minutes.
3 minutes. That's what I thought. All right. Thank you. So Richard, you can go ahead. You know the protocol in 3 minutes.
So this is Richard Shield, 6701 West Crestview Loop Southeast. The budget documents provided by the city for tonight's public hearing are completely inadequate. It does not allow members of the public to know whether the proposed budget is reasonable. The documents give only a top-level number for each fund's balance at the beginning and end of each year, and the total money flowing into and out of the fund during the year. The documents tell us nothing about how the money will be spent. I cannot imagine any family or company making budget decisions on such skimpy information, nor should our city. I assume the city administration has the details. Being married to a city council member, I know that the council has been given some detail, although not nearly as much as I would want our decision-making body to have. Why go through the motions of a public hearing when the public is not given enough information to provide informed comment? Members of the public should be able to drill down and see what the spending provides for the residents. For example, the estimated 2021 expenditures for parks is about $1.8 million. What does that get us? What would we as residents be willing to give up in order to reduce the cost and therefore save in taxes? What do we as residents get for the over $2 million per year being spent on community development? The Utilities Capital Fund has almost $10 million worth of spending. How much of that goes for building capacity for future growth that many residents don't even want for the city? There's no way for residents to know. After months of budget workshops for the council, I expected better than this for a public hearing, especially when we're now at the point in the calendar when, if I understand correctly, the council is running up to a deadline for approving the budget. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shield. I see a couple other members of the public joining us tonight. Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this time? And some of you have been invited into the panelist section. You can certainly raise your hand there as well if you'd like. All right. See no one else indicating that I'd like to speak. I will hereby close the public hearing on the 2021-22 preliminary biennium budget. There will be another opportunity in a couple of weeks to speak to this as well. And now open the public hearing regarding the 2021-22 revenue source is now open. Again, is there anybody who would like to speak to this? Mr. Shield, go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Someone's got there we go. Okay, your microphone is on. Well, no, looks like it disappeared. Oh, he disappeared. Well, can someone turn Mr. Shield's microphone back on? It looks like both his
He's been promoted to panelist on accident.
There we go. Okay, Mr. Shield, your microphone's back on again.
Okay, so this, again, Richard Shield, 6701 West Crestview Loop, Southeast. In the City Council's budget roundtable meetings over the past few months, the city administration has talked a lot about the effects of reduced tax revenues due to these difficult economic times. I know this makes it difficult to balance the city's budget. The law allows the city to increase its income by increasing things like property taxes and water rates. Just because the law allows it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. There are many among us who have lost their jobs or had their income greatly reduced. When a family loses their income, they don't have the option, like the city, of just telling someone else that they have to give money to the family. That family has to look for ways to reduce how much they spend, and for some families, those cuts would be severe. In the budget roundtable meetings, the city government has discussed ways to reduce spending, but it's also discussed ways to increase the money that it gets from residents. This is not the time to take more from residents. It's better to look at severe spending cuts, just as many families are forced to do. For example, do we need our parks to be as nice when families are suffering? Could the police department eliminate a layer of middle management, or maybe eliminate the no call too small policy? Although increasing property taxes on tonight's agenda, I know from other city meetings that the council is considering shifting some expenses from the general fund to the utilities enterprise fund. Most people listening to this meeting tonight are probably not familiar with what that means. It means the city could move some expenses that are currently paid for by property taxes to the part of the budget that's paid for by water and sewer rates. Property tax increases are limited by state law, but the city council can increase water and sewer rates without such restrictions. For families struggling with the loss of income, both property taxes and water bills come out of the same pocket. So I ask two things of the council. One, don't add to the property tax burden of struggling families. And two, do not add to the overall burden just by holding down property taxes and then shifting increases to water bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shield. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak to this item at this time, specifically to this item during the public hearing? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And again, note that there will be another opportunity in 2 weeks or a second meeting in November to speak to that. All right, with that, I'll move on to the proclamations. First one up is the Snoqualmie Valley Community Network has helped organize the Be Kind movement and has set up a website and a Facebook page on that. And they've asked us to participate in declaring November Be Kind Month. You've probably already seen some postings on that. They're doing a lot of fun stuff with it. So it's my privilege to join them in that effort and read a proclamation tonight. So whereas the city of Snoqualmie honors those, no matter how young or old, to make a positive difference in our community and our world. And whereas the Snoqualmie Valley Community Network's youth suicide prevention program, which includes the Pound Be Kind SV campaign, makes our schools, communities, and states stronger by facilitating meaningful change through simple acts of kindness. And whereas any day, week, or month is a good time to remind all of us of the need to remember that compassion, empathy, humility, and respect are essential ingredients in the creation and maintenance of a kind and civilized society. And whereas kindness is a fundamental part of the human condition, which bridges the divides of race, religion, politics, and gender. And whereas by knowing, understanding, and using our power of kindness, we have the ability to send out a positive ripple that may travel throughout the valley and beyond. And whereas fostering acts of kindness within our community, we help our citizens develop a thoughtful foundation and perspective within themselves and those around them. And whereas through simple acts of kindness, we can promote healthy behaviors and positive dynamics within our community. And whereas we seek to cultivate caring, kindness, and compassion within our community. Now, therefore, I, Matthew R. Larson, Mayor of the City of Snoqualmie, do hereby proclaim November 2020 as Kindness Month in the City of Snoqualmie and recognize World Kindness Day on November 13th of each year. So with that, I'll ask Carla to, if she'd like to say or add any few words or just a little more description about that, and thank her for coming tonight to receive the proclamation virtually. Carla Russell, do you want to say a few words or turn on your video and audio?
Yeah, certainly. So I am Carla Russell. I'm one of the program coordinators over at the Snoqualmie Valley Community Network. And if you're not familiar with us, we provide community health and preventative programs and resources for the entire valley. And one of the programs that I oversee is our #BeKindSV campaign. And I want to thank, on behalf of the network, as well as our #BeKindSV advisory team, we want to thank the City of Snoqualmie for participating in that and proclaiming November as Kindness Month. Hoping everybody has seen the banners that we have throughout the valley. And if you get a chance, please take a moment and go take a picture. They're interactive banners. To be the I in kind, you would stand where the I is in kind. And a few people have been quite creative and have been able to take selfies in front of those banners, which I was pretty impressed in seeing. But taking a picture, and if you're on social media, to go ahead and post it with #BeKindSV on there. I will be able to see that, and we can put it up on our Facebook group. If you haven't had a chance to join our Facebook group yet, it is the name, #BeKindSV. Go ahead and join that, and you can see our daily challenges. We have reached out to 30 people within the Snoqualmie Valley to become kindness ambassadors and share kindness challenges daily. So those are really fun to see, and some have been quite creative. And then we have also put together a business pledge for our businesses in the community to pledge kindness throughout their organization. So business owners, please take a moment and go ahead and fill out that pledge. We'll put you on a list that we are sharing daily on our Facebook group. And we will send out a great, we support #BeKindSV window cling. So we're just wanting to put this out there. This campaign started within the schools, and we knew we were going to get out to the community. We thought we had a little bit more time, but this pandemic accelerated us to get out into the community to be able to bring the community together to help build an even stronger foundation for our efforts in kindness. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Carla. Thank you for the efforts. And I'm sorry if I missed it, if you noted it, but the Be Kind banner for Snoqualmie is located just to the left of the depot downtown. So if you, I'm sure they would really encourage or welcome if council members wanted to go down and take the time to do that and post it.
Yes, please.
That would be great. And I was also invited or asked to do a video that they could post at some point as well. The theme I thought that was appropriate. One was for Veterans Day that'll be released then, but the other was I'm often having to remind myself that, you know, being kind and courtesy and respectful is not just a tree hugging frou-frou kind of thing or a sign of weakness. That's really the heart of effective politics. Politics is often seen as sort of a dirty word, a nasty business. I've always, kept as my North Star, the fact that politics is essential to functioning relationships, whether it's in a family or at work or in the context of what we're doing here. And kindness can involve debating ideas, but it doesn't involve attacking persons and character. And we're more effective as families, businesses, and organizations, and certainly as councils and administrations when we remember that kindness and respect and courtesy are at the heart of those conversations and disagreements. So, Carla, thank you for, I think, that most serious work and good work that you're doing business that you're about. So wish you all
Thank
the
you.
best. Yeah. All right. With that, on a similar theme, Council, I don't know if some of you are aware, but since the Black Lives Matter issues that kind of erupted during the June or late May and June of this year, there's one particular resident who reached out to some other folks in the community, Nicole Rousseau, who's joined us here tonight. Nicole, why don't you wave your hand real quick so everybody can see who you are if in the video. She's put a lot of energy behind sort of encouraging us to take a look at other measures we could do as a city, or at least more proclaim where our stance is in. And there was no question to me that I know the council's already made some statements on this, but we're working with Nicole to create a task force. As some of the council might recall, we've done task forces in the past on whether it was sustainability and climate change issues that resulted in things that got incorporated in the comp plan. Some are long lasting, some are fairly brief, but we've advanced the notion of developing a diversity, inclusion, and equity task force to first of all, what I think is basically putting a spotlight on what otherwise are sort of things that are hidden from the community on some very progressive uses of force policies that our police department currently has, and a lot of policies internally. I think that effectively do address issues of racism or treating people fairly or unjustly. And then examining throughout that organization with people from our community. I see Rick has joined us here tonight. Rick Woodruff. Rick, thanks for joining us. I know Rick's wife is, I think, part of this committee. Sherry's one of a few African-American residents in Snoqualmie, and so she's been part of some of those conversations with Nicole as well. So we want to get, a diverse perspective of some people from the community that can kind of, again, review some of those policies and issues with us. And part of the kickoff of that effort is, again, the proclamation being presented tonight. For diversity, equity, inclusion for all, and declaring that racism has no place in our community. Whereas the city of Snoqualmie is a vibrant and creative community where residents embrace diversity, celebrate arts and culture, promote vitality, and treasure the environment. And whereas the state of Washington, the United States of America, has witnessed recent and historic injustices caused by systemic racism, hate crimes, and discrimination, intentional or not, targeted at Black, African Americans, and other minority communities. And whereas Snoqualmie is a community where we welcome all regardless of race, ethnicity, place of origin, physical ability, socioeconomic status, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, or religion. And whereas we demonstrate empathy, compassion, and respect in all our interactions, and whereas each of us are responsible and accountable to ourselves and each other to promote and celebrate diversity, equality, and inclusion for all, and whereas the city of Snoqualmie stands up against stigma, bigotry, and hate-based violence for any reason, and declares that no one shall be discriminated against because of race, faith, ethnicity, gender, age, disability, sexual orientation, or any other real or perceived difference. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Matthew R. Larson, Mayor of the City of Snoqualmie, joined by our City Council, on behalf of the citizens of Snoqualmie, City Council and staff, do hereby proclaim that each of us is responsible and accountable to ourselves and each other to promote and celebrate diversity, equality, and inclusion for all, and to take the steps to end racism in our community. Dated this 9th day of November 2020. So again, thank you for the efforts from Nicole and Rick, and from your wife and others. Nicole, did you want to say a few words? Or?
Sure. First, I want to say thank you, Mayor Larson, for being willing to have the first uncomfortable conversation that we had and stepping into it. And I love that this is following Kindness Day, because this really is about empathy and kindness and just celebrating diversity and inclusion for everyone. We do have systemic racism built into kind of the structure. And I love that you're willing to really double click and look at what changes need to be made. This is where it all starts. So thank you so much. And again, from the bottom of my heart, and for those that I've been working with, I know it means a lot in our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. I would just add quickly, I know that my a lot of my family on both sides was from Minnesota. It was kind of the heartbeat of America. Not exposed to a lot of diversity, but at age 5, my dad became part of, joined the Air Force. And I started my life as an Air Force brat, and although some people sort of felt sorry that every 2 to 4 years we were pulling up and moving and never had sort of a hometown or place, I thought it was a profoundly enriching sort of experience living on places like Guam or going to Japan at age 10 and just being exposed to these very diverse cultures in different places around the world. So I don't, it's not platitudes to me. To me, I get excited about it. That's why I was excited about our Sister Cities program, because I want the youth and people in our community to have the same experiences of those, exposure to those diverse perspectives and cultures and experiences. I think it does nothing but strengthen us. So Rick, I thank you for joining us tonight. Did you or Sherry want to have any comments or words to add real quick? Or?
Well, Shelley's at a soccer board meeting, unfortunately,
okay,
and couldn't be here, so I'm sort of her surrogate. And no, I really don't have anything to add. I thank you, as Nicole did, for doing this. And the real, in my estimation anyway, the proof's sort of in the pudding. And this is something that we've started, and now we just have to keep it going and make sure that that it's out there for people to see and recognize. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, council people, for doing this. It means a lot to me personally, a lot to Shelley, Nicole, and a lot of other people. So thank you very much. And I'm sorry she can't be here.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Rick. And for those of you that don't know, I want to do another call out for Rick. Rick was very involved with the Legion post across the hall or across the street from City Hall in working with Jennifer Kirk and helping support the homeless shelter down there, particularly given that there's many veterans that find themselves homeless. So it's been phenomenal work. I consider Rick one of those some of the salt, those people that are salt of the earth, just really quietly working behind the scenes to lift up the community and those, particularly those who are more disenfranchised and again, kind of marginalized in the community. So Rick, thank you so much for those efforts as well, ongoing efforts.
You bet. Thank you, Matt. Don't forget, folks, Wednesday is Veterans Day.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Okay, with that, we'll move on to any other citizens' comments for items that are not on the agenda tonight. Do we have any? Sorry, I'm kind of jumping back and forth here on screens. If any other members of the public would like to comment on anything else that's not on the agenda tonight, this would be the time to do so. All right, seeing none, we will move on. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. All items listed below will be acted by one motion. Action items include minutes for the October 26, 2020 roundtable and regular city council meeting. And agenda bill, hang on a second, I got to figure out which one was the only one not upheld. Agenda bill 20096, interlocal agreement with the Snoqualmie School District number 410 for personal protection equipment fit testing. Do we have a motion, council?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated. Is there any discussion, council? All right. Hearing none or seeing no one's hand go up, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. All right, motion is approved. So as is per the council's protocol, we will move on to the items that were removed. So if someone could make a motion to approve the warrants as presented tonight.
I'll move to approve the warrants, the claims and warrants as presented.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the warrants as presented. Is there any discussion on that, council? Mayor Pro Tem, or the chair of the our auditing committee, Finance Administration, I'll turn it over to you to comment first.
Yes, did you want to take public comment?
Oh, thank you. Yes, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to future action? I don't see anyone raising their hand. So go ahead, Councilman Mayhew.
Yeah, a report to the council that the F&A committee, as per our rules of procedure, council rules of procedure during the COVID crisis, the F&A committee members did review all claims and warrants being presented. Several council members questioned a number of the items and were satisfied with the responses. and the support provided, and unanimously recommends that the council approve the claims.
All right, Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes, so I am not going to be voting to approve the warrants because I'm not able to see the warrants.
All right, any other questions or discussion, council? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 I'm sorry, not the minutes, but the warrants, as it's stated again. All right, all those opposed?
No.
All right, warrants are approved. Moving on to Agenda Bill 20091, First Amendment to Schedule 139, Voluntary Long-Term Renewable Energy Services Agreement, Green Direct, between the City of Snoqualmie and Puget Sound Energy.
So on April 10th, 2017, the City of Snoqualmie entered into an agreement with Puget Sound Energy for renewable energy for all city accounts. The city was scheduled to begin receiving this energy in 2019, but due to project setbacks, this was delayed to late 2020. The changes to the project start day require an update to the service agreement to account for changes to charging rates and start date. Move to approve the First Amendment to Schedule 139 Voluntary Long-Term Renewable Energy Service Agreement and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve. Excuse me one second. Agenda Bill 091 as stated by Councilmember Ross.
Right. So
Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action?
Mr. Mayor, this is David Hoffman with Puget Sound Energy.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, thank you very much. The only thing that I will say is that my colleague Heather Mulligan and I are both here to answer any questions that may come up in your discussion.
Thank you, David. Yeah, the council did get a full briefing from you folks last time, 2 weeks ago. So Councilmember Ross, go ahead.
right, as you recall, as Mayor Larson just said, PSC gave a presentation regarding the windmills in our 15-year contract. And this is to change the start date and also changing the rates. And the rates are actually lower than what we originally contracted. And it is due to, let's see, greater economies of scale among several other green projects, and also includes liquidated damages due to the construction delay. Thank you. And so community development, let's see, approved moving this agenda bill forward to the full council for approval.
All right, any discussion, council?
I have my hand raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay. So the reason I pulled this off the consent agenda is because I was looking for a cost analysis of this, a break-even point from the time that we start until the costs will end up being less expensive, and we didn't get that.
David, do you want to address that?
This is Heather. I can address that. Under the agreement with the reduced rates under Green Direct and the current credit that is also applied to the bill as a result of your participation, you actually will be saving money from day one. So that is the break-even point, is day one.
Oh, so why aren't more cities signed up for this?
Well, when the city originally enrolled, there would be an additional cost. And there also is a limited amount of this. So you're subscribing to the anticipated output of specific renewable energy projects. And this was the first one that we enrolled. And so there was enough to enroll 20 different customers in this particular project. We will be looking at the possibility of rolling out additional rounds of Green Direct in the future to allow others to participate as well.
Yeah.
Point of order.
Nice.
Point of order. I don't believe we're here to speculate on the motives of other municipalities.
I'm only allowing it, Councilmember Holloway, because she's just asking questions pertaining to what the benefit to the city of Snoqualmie. So Councilor Shepherd, if you could sort of tie it
We
up.
had that discussion when we entered into this agreement. This discussion is to reduce the rates, accept the lower rate, and accept the different change in the prior agreement. Prior agreement is not in question.
Yeah, okay, I'll sustain. Thank you. Councilor Shepherd, do you have any additional questions? The bottom line is this is a net benefit for the community. When we entered into it, we knew there were some risks that the rates could be equal to or greater than a conventional rates using conventional power. But it just so happens we're actually coming out with a savings here. And in addition to doing the right thing, embracing more renewable energies, I thought Heather's answer to your question would be the reason why we jumped on this and other cities didn't, is because we're quick and we're smart. So, but anyway, go ahead, Councilor Shepherd. Did you have any questions or clarifications you wanted?
Yeah, I have a request that can we get some sort of a line chart showing what it would have cost if we hadn't done this program versus using the program, and if it's a net, good news, that's fine. I would just like to see that.
Well, you don't need a line. Heather, maybe you can just quote what are some of the conventional prices per kilowatt hour versus this program as just an example. You don't need a line chart.
Oh, I thought, point of order, I thought we sustained this.
Yeah, okay. Again,
not we, you.
Well, I'm a little confused. I mean, the question she's asking now is about the current contract as compared to other.
Right, but what might have been is not relevant. We're going to talk about what is.
Okay, what Councilor Holloway was taking issue with any past contracts or the motivations getting into the contract. What Councilmember Shepherd just asked is about current rates. In other words, for next month, next year, compared to other cities or what other cities are paying that are not part of the Green Direct program. I think that's very relevant to her decision on this contract. I think that could probably be in lieu of, we're not going to get graphs tonight showing that, but Heather could provide a quick answer, I think, on just showing a couple of examples real quick of what in the next year, conventional ratepayers are anticipated to pay per kilowatt hour versus those that are members of the Green Direct program.
Mr. Mayor, this is David. If I might, I'm gonna jump in and say I don't know that Heather came prepared to answer that question in particular, but both Heather and I can work together, and we're happy to get that information to the council tomorrow AM timeline, sometime in the next day. I think it's a relevant question. In the grand scheme of things, I would also suggest that the graph that was shown when Heather presented last time to the council really did show the difference between rates that were previously agreed to by the city and what the new rates would be. And it would be as simple as looking at what the city's current rates are and on immediate past bills and comparing those to what future bills would look like under this agreement.
Well, and I'll just add that as a reminder, the city's bills will be the same with the exception of a Green Direct charge and a Green Direct credit on those bills. So there are essentially all the other rates and charges are still there. We just added the Green Direct rate, which will start out at 4.3 cents roughly per kilowatt hour. And then you will also receive a Green Direct credit, which is at 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So the difference is the difference between that rate and that credit multiplied out times your kilowatt hour usage.
Yeah, so the delta is the slight savings. Okay.
That's correct.
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, so I do not have any wish to see a chart. And I hope that the PSE staff doesn't waste their time providing it to this council. I certainly am not asking for it. I understand the concept of break even from day one. You don't need a chart to help me understand that concept. It's a fantastic program with a fantastic outcome. I think requests for data from service providers or from staff where that data is not going to drive any decision or any greater understanding than what we have is exactly the kind of cost being driven into our structure that we just heard about earlier from the council member's husband, asking us to get costs out of the system. For heaven's sake, let's not drive more costs into a system when we're having great success.
Councilmember Ross.
I agree with what Councilmember Mayhew just stated, and I think Councilmember Shepherd, if you're looking for more information, look at the agenda bill. It has the Snoqualmie Green Direct customer update, and that is the presentation they gave last week or 2 weeks ago, and there's an example of the costs and the credits. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmembers Ross and Shepherd, you still have your hands up. I don't know if you forgot it or if you have additional questions. Councilmember Shepherd?
So I did go through the materials and I still have questions. And that's why I asked for the information that I asked for. And I cannot vote for something that I don't understand.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or discussion, council? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
All right, the motion passes. David and Heather, thank you once again for taking time out of your evening to join us and assisting with this great program.
It's
Thank
our
you very
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
All right, have a good evening. All right, moving on to Agenda Bill AB 20090, Resolution 1558, determining the lowest responsible bidder and awarding and authorizing execution of a public works contract with Nordvind Sewer Service LLC for the lift station number 2 improvements project.
All right. This project is necessary to rehabilitate wastewater lift station number 2, aka First Street Lift Station, which was constructed in the mid-1960s. Improvements include replacement of old pumps, valves, and piping, upgrade of electrical switchgear, and additional repairs and upgrades to the project site. Building envelope, dry well, and emergency backup equipment. Move to adopt Resolution 1558, determining the lowest responsive bidder and awarding and authorize the mayor to sign a public works contract with Nordvind Sewer Service LLC for the lift station number 2 improvements project.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 20090 stated by Councilmember Sunwall. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Shepherd. Okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I don't have anything to add.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Shepherd, go ahead.
Public comment, Mayor?
Oh, yes, thank you so much. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to possible action? I don't see anybody in the attendees. We had a few people from the public, but I think they've all left, so I don't see anybody else raising their hands. So Councilmember Shepherd, go ahead.
So one of the things that I'm concerned about on our utilities capital improvement plan projects is that we have this built-in clause that says that we are building for future growth, but we don't have any idea what proportion of the project is for that future growth versus what is actually needing to be maintained.
Councilmember Shepherd, can I ask you to direct your questions and comments to this specific agenda bill on the sewer lift station number 2 on the work and accepting the bid on lift station number 2. Do you have any questions or comments about lift station number 2?
Yes, I sent a link out to the council regarding how they track their lift stations in other cities. And they have an accounting of how many lift stations they have, how many people are being served by those lift stations, and a lot of other details that we do not get. And this is a $500,000 project. And I'd like that kind of information before I vote on any kind of spending at this level to understand what we are voting for.
All right, any other questions or comments, council? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay.
No.
All right, moving on to the motion is carried. Moving on to Agenda Bill 20095, Resolution 1560, canceling certain city warrants.
The city of Snoqualmie authorizes payment of city warrants throughout the budget year. Certain warrants that are over 1 year old or canceled due to duplication issues or other reasons are required to be canceled pursuant to RCW 3956040. Move to adopt resolution number
1560.
canceling certain city warrants.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 20095 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Does the chair of the committee want to speak to this, or?
Yes, to share with the council, this is a routine process that the finance department brings to us at least once a year, where they look back and where there are old warrants, they cannot cancel them, so they need to come out, ask us for permission. There was a list of those items attached to the agenda bill. These are mostly small dollar items, few $100s, with reasons given why they were, why they're now being canceled. They're either stale dated, they were never presented, or otherwise pursued by whomever they were issued to. The largest amounts, which was one item for 12,000, one for 3,000, all the items were smaller, or sorry, there's one item for 4,000, all the items were smaller than that, were for situations where a warrant was sent out for whatever reason, the vendor didn't receive it. That was verified by finance. They then issued a second warrant, but that warrant that was lost or never received, whatever happened to it, now needs to be canceled. And so they're coming back and asking us. So the reasons for each of the items were given and attached. The F&A committee went over these with staff and were satisfied that these were all appropriate and the reasons and amounts seemed appropriate. And so this was recommended unanimously to the council to be passed.
All right, thank you. Councilor Shepherd.
So the reason that I pulled this off the consent agenda is because the two larger warrants, one for 12,000, one for 3,000. I think it would be appropriate for us to have the warrant number, check number that replaced them. And that was the reason I pulled it off, is to ask if we can get that level of information next time.
Councilmember Mayhew.
No, nothing.
All right. Is there anything else, council? Any other questions or comments? All right.
I got one, Mayor. I can't see my hand and I can't find the raise button hand, whatever.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Sunwall.
So I'm just a curiosity question. This seems like something that would have been asked at the finance meeting that typically certain members appear at. Is that an appropriate place, Councilmember Mayhew, who's the chair of that committee, to be asking these questions?
Mayor, sorry if I respond.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly, I think most of us have followed the practice of monitoring other committees, and absolutely for F&A committee, but certainly for, I think for all of our committees, we'd like to see each other trying to get these kind of questions into staff in advance, when they have time to look into these. But I would say, again, the same comment I made just a few minutes ago. I think, in these tough times, fellow council members, when we are looking to keep costs down, we heard earlier that the proposed budget is down 6% in costs. We know that we're struggling to pay COLAs. We're struggling to keep rates and taxes down. Asking for additional information that really isn't going to help make a decision. I just think we've got to challenge ourselves not to do this. We can't keep driving costs into a system and expecting that we're not going to have to find some way to pay for that.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So one of the things that happens when we go to committee meetings is that they're open for us to talk about anything that's not on the agenda. And so typically, if there's something on the agenda, you can't really talk about it when you go to the committee meetings.
Okay, that's not been my experience.
Categorically false for the meeting.
Until this current council, committee meetings have never invited comments from the public. They've been working meetings for the council, and every minute has been treated precious. So this council has been extraordinarily generous, for many of the chairs in the council committee meetings to provide for that comment, but I've never heard a council committee in the practices of those various chairs restricted to things that are not on the agenda. In fact, they've been inviting comments specifically to those agenda bills. So I don't understand where you're making that comment. Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, so I would just add to that. I think Councilmember Sundwall said, and I tried to say a minute ago, council members, this discussion that went to things not on the agenda, I wasn't really following that, but for things on the agenda, which certainly this agenda bill was on the F&A agenda, I follow the practice of sending questions that I have either to staff or to the committee chair in advance of their committee meetings. Let's do as much of that as we can. I think let's make our committees as effective as possible about answering the questions that any of us have. Let's go ahead and send those messages in and try and get them answered in advance.
All right, Councilmember,
Mayor, that all the committee chairs are currently in attendance, and I'd invite, if any committee chair has a different view, please speak up now, but otherwise, let's all take it as, yes, that is exactly what the committee chairs would want us all to do with each other.
Councilor Lissay?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo that because even on times where other obligations have kept us from attending committee meetings, as committee members, we've sent emails in advance, I've seen that from multiple folks, including myself. I've found that committees do take into consideration messages that are sent. If they're asked, questions are asked that are relevant to the items at hand and need to have clarifications, they get looked at. So I don't see any reason why a council member couldn't receive the agenda packet in advance, which we do, and ask questions that they have prior to the committee meeting, so that these sorts of questions are not showing up last minute as we're trying to make an approval.
Councilor Shepherd?
So I have not had that experience of people reading the email and responding or acknowledging them. So I don't know what the difference is, but I will continue to bring these things up during meetings when I'm not being heard.
Councilmember Holloway?
So let's look at the alternative of no action. Is to leave warrants that are either duplicative or unclaimed out there hanging. This is a mere request to cancel unclaimed duplicate checks. I call the question.
Okay, Mayor, Councilor, there's been a motion, a second, to call the question. I'll go to an immediate vote on that. Again, this requires a supermajority vote. All those in favor of calling the question say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. All right, I'm not hearing any opposition, so the question has been called. We're going back to the original vote, which is on Agenda Bill 20095. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Councilmember Shepherd, is your microphone off or?
It's on.
Okay. All right, motion's been approved. Moving on to ordinances, Finance Administration Committee. Agenda Bill 20094, ordinance finding a substantial need to set the limit factor at 101% for regular property taxes for the year 2021. This was introduced tonight and will be ready for action in a couple of weeks. So at this point, if you could just read in the summary statement, please.
All right, the City of Snoqualmie requires the finding of a substantial need based on its own needs and requirements in order to levy the full 101% limit factor as allowed by RCW 84.55.005. The limit factor for a taxing jurisdiction with a population of 10,000 or over is the lesser of 101% or 100% plus inflation. Inflation is defined as the percentage change in the implicit price deflator for personal consumption expenditures in the United States. The implicit price deflator recorded for 2020 is 0.60% and therefore would result in a default limit factor of 106/10% without a finding of substantial need.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Mayhew. Any further discussion on this item, Council? All right, Seeing none, we'll move on to the agenda bill 20092, ordinance certifying an increase in the general taxes for the city of Snoqualmie for the fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2021 on all property, both real and personal in said city, which is subject to taxation. The general taxes are for the purpose of paying sufficient revenue to carry on the departments of said city for the ensuing year. Again, this was just for introduction tonight, so if you could just read the summary statement at this time.
The city of Snoqualmie requires a regular levy in the amount of $8,453,037, which includes a 2.03% increase in property tax revenue in the amount of $164,170 from the previous year in order to discharge the expected expenses and obligations of the city of Snoqualmie.
All right, thank you. At this time, is there any further discussion or questions on this item? Again, this is one we discussed at the roundtable. All right, seeing or hearing none, we'll move on to Agenda Bill 20093, ordinance levying the general taxes and levying excess property taxes for the city of Snoqualmie for the fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2021 on all property, both real and personal in said city, which is subject to taxation. The general taxes are for the purpose of paying sufficient revenue to carry on the departments of said city for the ensuing year, and the excess property tax levy is for the purpose of paying debt service on the city's unlimited tax general obligation bonds, 2016, all as required by law and providing for collection thereof. Again, this is for introduction tonight, so if you could just read the summary statement at this time.
The city of Snoqualmie requires a regular levy in the amount of $8,453,037, which includes an increase in property tax revenue from the previous year and amounts resulting from the addition of new construction and improvements to property and any increase in the value of state assessed property and amounts authorized by law as a result of any annexations that have occurred and refunds made in order to discharge the expected expenses and obligations of the city of Snoqualmie. In addition, the city of Snoqualmie requires an excess levy in the amount of $251,328 to provide the money necessary to pay the annual debt service requirements of the city's unlimited tax general obligation bonds 2016.
All right, again, this is for introduction tonight. Are there any other questions or comments on this item at this time? Councilor Shepherd.
So I had a comment that doesn't really fit either any of these, but it would have fit for the roundtable. When can I?
Oh, that's, you had a question at that time. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we were talking about.
Actually, I'm not sure if it pertains. Well, there's no action being taken on these, Councilor Shepherd. So as I stated before, let's hold that for the committee of the whole. Once I get through these ordinances, or introduce these ordinances, then we'll come down to reports, and under committee of the whole, I'll open it to come back to the roundtable discussion. Does that sound fair enough?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, again, Council, any questions on Agenda Bill 20093 at this time, or further questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Agenda Bill 20098, ordinance adopting the 2021-22 biennium budget, providing for severability and effective date. Again, this is only for introduction tonight, so if you could just read the summary statement.
The City Council is required by law to adopt a budget prior to the end of the year.
All right, very good. This, again, could be available for possible action at the next City Council meeting, or has been traditionally done at the first meeting in December. All right, with that, we'll move on to reports. Is there any report for Parks and Public Works Committee?
Mr. Mayor, is there going to be any discussion about the agenda bill?
Councilman Sam, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, any questions or comments? Go ahead.
Cut him some slack, Matt. This is the first time he's been mayor.
Yeah, I know it's
I've been distracted by this annoying, there's like some sort of advertising thing on Pint Rest that got into the PDF player, and I can't get rid of it. So I keep having to toggle back and forth between screens because I can't see my whole council notes. But anyway, go ahead, Councilman Wilson.
Well, Councilmember Sunwell would tell you to be careful what websites you go to. I wanted to ask this question just real quickly because it's something we brought up earlier. And since this is relating to adopting the biennial budget, Robert, if you're available, maybe you could again describe, what we are adopting, that we are adopting a 2-year biennial budget. And how does that apply to years 2021 and 2022 overall? Just an overview recap of that, because I'd like to make sure I understand.
Yeah, so again, you're adopting the 2021 and 22 annual budget with the appropriations. Now, are we still on the property tax? I'm sorry, I've got a shaking hand. I've got
Point of information, Mayor.
I'm sorry?
It's not an annual budget, correct? It's a biennial budget?
biennial.
A biennial budget.
Yeah, so it's the biennial budget. And so what we're doing tonight is we're introducing the ordinances to that effect. Now, you are in charge of appropriations. We, of course, as far as what you are appropriating for the budget for each fund for the city, each for the next 2 years. So again, that was that total column, if you remember on the chart that Drew showed. It's on the far right column. That's what you're voting on. Now, the revenues are subject to change. So right now, with the revenue forecast that we have in that chart is our best guess as of November 1st of this year. That is subject to change because, of course, we're still at the end of the fiscal year, but we're currently still in 2020. So we're not going to know what our actuals are, of course, until January for this fiscal year. So those revenues, that's our best guess at a starting point. Same thing with the fund balances. Those are our projected fund balances for the end of 20, what we're going to start the year with. Now, for example, say you pass the budget and 6 months from now, revenues drop like crazy. We'll probably come to you with a plan to reduce the expenditures. You do not have to amend revenues. The part that is concerning of council and in your purview is the expenditure and the appropriation end. And that's the part that you control. So you're setting the appropriations. Because revenues, we could set it at, say you have one fund that has $4 million and $5 million comes in. You don't have to go back to council for that. But say that you have expenditures that are 5 million instead of 4 million. That's what we come back to council for. And so right now, this is our best guess on both sides, what the revenues are going to come in and what our spending plan is as approved by the departments and as reviewed by the city council during the committees and during the roundtable meetings. In addition to that, we do have the estimates in there which are subject to change. So we might have to come back for an amendment for utility CIP and then non-utility CIP for the next 2 years. Because again, utility CIP, we're in the rate setting process. We're going to come back with an ordinance by the end of the year with that. And the same thing with non-utility CIP. We're going to have another reopen the book, so to speak, on the non-utility CIP coming in probably the first quarter of next year, where you do some deliberation. So right now, this again is the spending plan for the next 2 years. It's subject to change, but right now this is the spending plan for the next 2 years. That's what we're coming to council for. I hope that makes sense. And anybody else that wants to chime in, please.
When I would add further, Councilman, let's say Robert spoke to the revenues of what sort of actions would be taken if the revenues came in lower than estimated. But conversely, if the expenses, for example, right now, some of the budget projections you've seen are making assumptions about no COLA increases. We know for a fact that we're not going to probably prevail on much of that, at least through 2021. So if your appropriations or your approvals of the expense number and the revenue number is what you're approving, that means the onus is upon us that if costs like COLAs and others go up, we will have to make subsequent cost cuts or decreases in order to compensate for that to still land at the number that you're approving or recommended for approval.
A more than adequate explanation. Thank you.
Councilor Summo?
Yeah, just as most people probably know this is, we use a lot of acronyms here, but COLA is cost of living increase. That's going to become important to the general public as we go through negotiations with, I think, 3 different unions that span across the city. So in case you thought you were talking about some sort of beverage, it's actually just cost of living increase. That's an important acronym to explain.
Yeah, cost of living adjustment is the actual acronym, but that's a good reminder to get.
Yeah, you're right. It's not COLA, it's COLA. You're right. My bad.
But it's although COLA might not be as confusing as a soda. Well, that's a good reminder to on occasion make sure we're stating the full name rather than using the acronyms and using the city mumbo jumbo. So, good point. Thank you. Unfortunately, there's no other members of the public here tonight to hear that point. So, Any other questions or comments at this time, council, on this item?
One side note I did want to make, in the transmittal letter that is on our website and I did send, I also sent a separate budget memo to each of the council members. That was kind of explaining what the current environment is right now. But again, it's subject to change. We have, a new president coming in January. There could be a stimulus bill. I know there's more discussion on that but the COVID cases are reaching record highs. That could have another impact. So on the revenue side, again, it is subject to change. This is our best information available that we're preparing this budget on. It's something that we're looking for. It could go up, could go down, but it's certainly in flux. It's a very uncertain environment going in the next year.
All right, seeing no other hands up or discussion, I'll move on to reports. Any report for Parks and Public Works Committee?
None.
Community Development Committee report?
No report.
Finance Administration Committee?
No further report.
Public Safety Committee, Agenda Bill 20097, Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Snoqualmie and IAFF Local 2878 to allow the city to pay matching deferred compensation to firefighter Peter O'Donnell for the period of March 9th, 2020 through September 30th, 2020. Could the chair of the Public Safety Committee read the motion, please?
The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted city operations, and on March 2020, City Hall was closed with all orders to work, staff to work from home. Actually, I'm missing, I can't see all of it because the names are in the.
All right. Did you want one of the committee members to read the motion?
If someone else can see the entire summary statement, I'd like, Sean, can you do that? I still don't have
Yeah, I got it. I'll just start over. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted city operations, and in March 2020, City Hall was closed and all staff ordered to work from home. Due to COVID-19 related remote work restrictions, firefighter O'Donnell did not participate in a new employee onboarding orientation session and was not aware of the opportunity or procedures for enrolling in one of the city's deferred compensation plans. In Article 27.1 of the IAFF 2878 collective bargaining agreement with the city provides a matching deferred compensation of $200 per month. The city and the union desire to resolve this outstanding dispute regarding firefighter Peter O'Donnell's deferred compensation benefit. Move to approve memorandum of understanding MOU between the city of Snoqualmie and IAFF Local 2878 to allow the city to pay matching deferred compensation to firefighter Peter O'Donnell for the period of March 19th, 2020 to September 30th, 2020.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 20097 as stated by Councilmember Sunwell. Any discussion? Councilmember Jeans, go ahead.
This was a unique circumstance, sort of something that wouldn't have happened under normal circumstances. All parties are in agreement that this should be handled on an individual basis, and there seems to be no exposure for other employees saying, hey, what about this? What about me? So simple agreement between all of the parties to catch up on this and let this person get into deferred compensation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Jeans. Is there any other questions or comments, Council? All right, seeing or hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
No.
All right, motion is passed. Now moving on to committee of the whole, Councilmember Shepherd, if we could come back to you and just kind of continue the roundtable discussion at this time.
Yeah, so what one of the questions I have is that during our budget process, we're looking at identifying revenue. And one of the things that I have not heard us have a discussion about is reviewing developer fees. And I'm wondering when we're going to get around to that.
Is this a discussion that you heard the rest of the council or majority of the council suggest they needed to have or wanted to have? Or
well, we're talking about this is the time when we identify what income we can identify for the city, and that is one area that we do not talk about. And I am the only council member that brings it up. And I'm just curious if we're going to talk about it at any point.
okay, so I'm not sure if the administration's place to react to that. I'll just throw it to the rest of the council as to whether if a majority feels that's an item that we would like to have discussed, and then we could discuss what committee maybe to throw that into, or what actions you'd like the staff to make in regard to that. Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I would just say that the city has a wide range of fees that we charge. We charge fees for usage of our parks. We charge fees for all kinds of things related to development. There's this, what some people generally understand as being developer fees, which would be for perhaps larger developments, but even things that, I added a generator at my house about 10 years ago, and I had to pay a fee to the city with regard to that. It had to do with the fact the city had to send out an inspector. So I think that what we all need to do is I think revisit fees on an ongoing basis. But the idea that we're going to take every single fee and wait until sometime in November, once every 2 years, right before we're going to pass the budget, I would say that's not the time. That's what we have, in my view, all of these budget meetings we've had for the last year, all of our committee meetings that we have throughout the biennium. I think we should all be looking at these, and I think there's a number. I personally would like to see us relook at what we're charging for use of our parks. But I think it's come time now to vote on the biennial budget. I think the time to bring that up now, I think, is more looking forward, and in the future. I support. I think it's patently ridiculous, the notion that the rest of us don't care about fees. We absolutely do. But let's do that in an orderly fashion in our committees. Let's take it up then. But I don't wish to revisit those fees or feel the need to revisit those fees right now, right before we're at the 11th hour about to pass the budget.
Councilmember Jeans.
No. Sorry.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Ross.
So the comprehensive fee study was on the finance budget for the last 2 years, and it was not carried over. So there was a decision made that we can't afford at this point a $50,000 comprehensive fee study. So we've already made that decision.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So I just wanted to make a statement that I've been on council now for almost 3 years, and we've never talked about developer fees since I've been on council.
Councilmember Holloway.
So I believe in the last biennial, we actually moved these fees from an isolated fund to be part of the general fund. Council should be aware we did that from prior council to actually isolate these what you might call development fees, and try to understand them and get them gauged in the right place. And so we did that, settled where we were, moved it back to the general fund. That was last biennial. Further, I will agree with the position. Pick a time to do this, but this may not be the time to do it. We can do that as a year progresses and decide other fees. It will not have a material impact to the overall budget. Typically, you do these fees so they are self-sufficient, much like utilities. Okay, so we can engage in that if that is a desire of the council in next year, but holding up a budget discussion as a result, not appropriate.
Well, I will note, just as a historical point that Councilmember Jeans and Holloway are familiar with, the council in the last, well, I guess it was about coming on 3 years ago now, in the last updates to the utility fees, or the last utility fee plan, 3-year utility fee plan, they did make some significant adjustments or changes, adding a commercial rate and the general facility charges, so that we were capturing some developer fees from those developers in the city that were not part of the Snoqualmie Ridge development. Snoqualmie Ridge development, of course, has a unique way of approaching and capturing those fees through voluntary mitigation agreements, where we've come out extraordinarily well compared to many other communities, because we've had them pay for that infrastructure in full, not exposing the city to any inflationary costs and all that. before they complete it, like building a new park or the parkway and other assets and infrastructure, and then conveying that to the city once complete and fully inspected. So we've been in pretty good shape, but the opportunities, with the exception of newer developments, have been examined, but there's always room to look at it more. But it's not like they've been stagnant for some time. Those were revisited in great detail a little more than 3 years ago, as Councilmember Holloway and Jeans can attest to. All right, Councilmember Shepherd and Holloway, I still see your hands up. I don't know if you just forgot to put them down. Councilmember Shepherd, did you have any other comments?
Well, I did look at our fee structure for developers compared to Issaquah. Our fee structure is very different from theirs. And I would like to get a better understanding of why they're so different. But if this is not a good time, I would like to identify when the council would be interested in revisiting it.
No, I think it's a great question, and it's and again, I don't want to belabor it too much of the other council, that the council doesn't have an interest in discussing it tonight, but just in short, some of the profound difference between Sammamish and Snoqualmie is, again, when it came to like the construction of the parkway, or the building of parks and school impact fees or affordable housing, the construction of roads and sidewalks and all of the utility infrastructure, we had voluntary mitigation agreements where Quadrant and the developer was responsible for building all of that infrastructure on their dime. And then when it was fully completed, inspected, and approved, then it would be conveyed to the city for $0. And so we were fully protected, and that's why I think we were in actually a better stead. Sammamish, on the other hand, because they weren't a master plan community and had multiple developers developing in the area in a more haphazard way, had to affect whether it was traffic impact fees and park fees and all that on a development by development basis, to charge a fee for a park that was outside of that. So in other words, their big community park wasn't part of the master plan of that particular developer. It was part of the overall community. So they would charge the fee to that developer in that smaller development that would be a proportion of the larger benefit to the community. So it's a very, very different kind of charging model. And we're moving to that in some ways with the mill site on the general facility charges, so that we can capture their cost share on, like, the initial complete rebuild of the wastewater treatment plant was done again on the Quadrant or Rico's dime, because the historical city didn't need that size of an infrastructure, and certainly the old plant wasn't sufficient to carry it at all. So again, it was a complete restructure of those fees. But it's complicated. It doesn't need more time, as some of the council members have said. In the 12th hour is probably not the best time to dive into that in detail. And I suspect I'm going to get scolded for going into too much detail. I didn't see whose hand went up first. Councilman Osei, I did a little roundtable. I haven't heard from you in a bit, so let's go with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to iterate that I have absolutely no desire to review the city of Issaquah's developer fees. We are the city of Snoqualmie last time I checked, and we have a standard of developer fees. I'm open to reviewing those developer fees and discussing what those might, whether they're considered impact fees or not, but whether they're still appropriate or we should readjust those or look at those. But again, we are, last I checked, we are still the city of Snoqualmie, and we should do things that are the best for the city of Snoqualmie.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, I didn't hear you say Issaquah. I thought you said Sammamish. The same dynamic and difference I just described applies to Issaquah as well. They don't have a master plan there, although similar things on Issaquah Highlands, however, where they did that. You don't have to worry about the cost of the fee. If you're telling them to, whatever the cost is, they have to assume it 100%. That's where we were well protected. All right, Councilmember Holloway, did you have your hand up or didn't put it down there?
Yeah, I think he was saying let's enough with the bedtime story.
I know, I got it. I caught the hint. Councilmember Jeans and then Councilmember Mayhew.
I'm reminding the Public Safety Committee members that we're having some discussion, sort of continuing discussion about possible charging fees for addressing home fires and automobile accidents.
Transport fees, yeah.
Transport fees. And it came up, the staff brought it to us and said, hey, let's discuss this. And I'm sort of encouraging chairpersons to talk to their directors in the areas that they work with and say, hey, let's talk about this sometime in the next year or so. And I think, Peggy, you are receptive to the idea of we're just We just need to address it at some time and then give attention to that, and then maybe take it to the full council and tell them what we're thinking about and get their concurrence. But this is something in the course of events that the chairpersons ought to consider talking to both their committee members and directors regarding fees in the future.
Thank you. Councilor Mayhew.
I was just going to say, I think we've got hopefully 2 council meetings left this year that are going to be, I believe, completely taken up with getting our budget passed, getting our utility plan, getting property taxes set, getting utility fees set. But if this, if a motion to assign this to a committee to look at was developer fees, or frankly any of our other fees, were to come up in January, I can say I will second such a motion and vote for referring that to a committee to be looked at.
Councilor Shepherd.
So that the one bill that we passed for sewer lift stations, the code that I forwarded to all the council members has to do with how developers are charged for those sewer lift stations, what their financial.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Sustained. I think like you're going to say it doesn't pertain to the roundtable discussion of the issues on the ordinances.
Thank you.
All right.
It has to do with developer fees.
Which we've agreed to discuss next year.
Okay, everybody else but me is allowed to talk about it. Okay.
Well, Councilor Shepherd, I think you've given 4 or 5 opportunities to talk about it. The council has not been receptive to addressing it at this time. But I mean, you keep talking about it, but you're not garnering the support of the majority of your associates here to do anything. So I mean, you can happily go on and on. I think everybody's clearly 100% understood your point. I'm not sure if you're adding new information. Do you want to keep adding?
Well, this is why I don't send email to the other council members. They're just shut down.
The purpose of committee of the whole is that we agree on what we're going to talk about. We've just spent 15 minutes talking about something 6 people don't want to talk about. It's not open mic night.
And I didn't hear people shut you down, Councilmember Shepherd. I heard people say, we hear your concern. It's been addressed in the past. In fact, it was recently as 3 years ago to look at some of those to capture fees for developers that have been outside the master plan community. You just heard Councilmember Mayhew say that he would vote in support in January, the new year, not in the 12th hour during the budget, to support you. He just offered his support of your effort to review developer fees and find the appropriate committee to send it to. What I think everybody's expressing is they're hearing you repeat the same concern.
But this was a different point, but that's fine.
Okay. And you may be relitigating an agenda bill that was already approved, but
No, it was a totally different point.
okay. Related to developer fees.
Yes. And sewer lift stations.
All right, I'll give you a little latitude to complete your new point. Go ahead.
It's that we can identify our expenses or what things cost our city, what goes into our utility fees, and identify it with the developers and what they're incurring as far as costs. And we can make sure that they're paying their fair share. And that code that I sent to all the council members demonstrates that. So if you read my email, that would be nice.
All right, thank you.
If I can, just one quick thing. I know I'm not raising my hand. Sorry, Brian.
Go ahead, Councilor.
It would.
Wait. Why are you apologizing to Brian?
Because Brian's hand's up. It would be particularly helpful, Councilmember Shepherd, if you would put some description of what you are sending us and what you are asking us to look at. A lot of times there's just emails that have a link. And I don't know if I'm going to have, some sort of, pop up on my screen like the mayor has or something by clicking on it. But it's just a matter of, it would be nice to have a little bit more explanation of what you're discussing, what you're offering. And it's not that we're not reading those emails. Trust me, I read them. But it's very unclear what you're getting at by just sending a link to a website.
All right, Councilmember Holloway.
So I also read the email and thought it was merely emphasizing the process under which we go through, in which we go get bids, we review responsive bidders, and we pick the lowest responsive bidder. We did that. The rate discussion is outside of the awarding of a contract for a capital project. If we want to have a rate discussion and how new capacity is paid for in that, that's part of the rate discussion. Not
Point of order. Did we vote on having a conversation about what emails were read and not read from Councilmember Shepherd? I don't remember that.
Well, you can put it down that I'm taking umbrage to comment that other council members are checked out.
I know, but yeah, okay.
I'll just make the comment that I probably should have earlier, just asked that members not question the motives of other members. All right, Bob Sturbank, you had your hand up, but I assume the question or the comment you're going to make was addressed. So any other items to pick up from the committee, from the discussions of the roundtable under committee of the whole here? Any other further discussions and comments at this time? All right, seeing none, just move on to announcements. The one I had was, as Rick Woodruff earlier reminded everybody, Wednesday is Veterans Day and the city holiday, so encourage folks to put a flag out or whatever. It's the first time I heard of it today, but there was something on Facebook saying that there's some sort of a green day to recognize veterans. So I'm not sure if I should light up my house green or red, white, and blue. But anyway, just note that Wednesday is Veterans Day. Question for the mayor pro tem, perhaps. I know we had a executive session during the FNA. I was anticipating one tonight. I just want to confirm that we do not have an executive session tonight before we kind of wrap things up. Is that correct?
That's correct, not tonight.
All right, thank you. Any other announcements or questions from the staff at this time? All right, seeing no hands being raised, there be no further business to come before the city council. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
The motion and a second to adjourn tonight's meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay. Kidding.
Okay. Motion passes 6-1. It doesn't matter anyway.
Do we need to recount? Do we need to recount on that vote?
No, sir. We're adjourned. Go enjoy. Bye-bye.